Yeah, so there's a counterfactual question here, which I think might be interesting for us to explore, which is why the ROK-U.S. alliance isn't considering having two separate commands connected with a liaison office and an MC, a structure that we've had before. Perhaps I can field this question to General Lim Ho-young.
His mic is off. I think everything starts from our history. So the genesis of US-Korea alliance is the Korean War. Because of the Korean War, the US-Korea alliance started, and after UNC, and so for more than 5 decades, we were fighting against the common enemy. So that is why that system has been continued. So this is the world's strongest alliance. This is the commanding structure, most strong commanding structure. It's not just like a US-Japan alliance. It's not each individual force has individual. This is the single structure. And so both countries have been fighting against the common enemy. So this has been proven through the war, and also for 7 decades, there are numerous exercises, and we overcame so many crises. And this is the fully trained commands. So this is unprecedented in the US, and you cannot see this CFC. And I think this is the most basic aspect of US ROK alliance. This is sort of like a new government, and that is what I can say.
Thank you, General. I saw a finger from Mr. Bruce Klinger.
Yeah, actually, the original OPCON transition plan was to have 2 separate parallel commands, Korea Command, CORECOM. And I think many of us thought it was a bad idea. It'd be like having 2 quarterbacks on the football field. So obviously, even though the 2 commands would be coordinating and all that, you know, it seemed by having 2 commanders, you have a greater danger of dropping the ball. Or, you know, if one commander said, well, we want to use the Air Force to, you know, attack North Korean forces right along the forward edge of the battlefield area, and the U.S. commander might say, well, no, we don't do tank plinking. We go downtown to the, you know, Pyongyang. We sever the head from the body, Colonel John Boyd's 5 concentric circle, you know, et cetera. And it's like, well, then who, you know, how do you have a coherent war plan if you have perhaps 2 commanders arguing for 2 different strategies? So I think it's better to keep a combined forces command and then just switch the first chair violin and second chair violin of the commander and the deputy commander.
This is a question for General Brooks. Given the talent and by way of talent and personnel management, how, given the exchange back and forth by those who have studied or worked in one another's countries, how do we maximize our soldiers' capabilities in understanding of our alliance partner based on that very practical experience through education or through service?
Those who have studied in the opposite country are very, very valuable because they have a cultural awareness, they tend to have a linguistic ability, and they have a firsthand experience in someone else's military. So there's great value in that. So whether it's foreign area officers from the United States or those selected under military education and training programs coming from the Republic of Korea to the United States, they're very valuable. And because we have been together as allies for so long, there are many of them, okay, generations of them now, some of whom are in very senior positions. And so I think that's beneficial and is an example of what it is that knits the Korea-US alliance together so tightly. It's not enough though, okay? So that is a nucleus, but not enough to form a full body. The rest of the organization then has to be informed by those who have the firsthand experience And they must engage with each other in the culture that is evident in each country. There's so much overlap between the two militaries. I often tell people it's a shared DNA without doubt, whether it's a doctrine or the approach to warfighting, even the uniforms that are worn, the military traditions that come with it, they are very much two arms on the same body. At the same time, they're two different arms. And as a result, each side needs to gain deeper experience and understanding with the culture of the other. And when that occurs, there can be firsthand knowledge of ability, there's trust, and there's a reduction of misunderstanding when culture impacts decisions. And that happens. How decisions are made, what level they go to, how much decentralization or centralization there might be. What happens when you call somebody out? Does it cause a loss of face, or is it an increase of clarity? These are two different things culturally, and they matter. So the closer we can get the two sides together, living with each other in a combined fashion, like the CFC headquarters is, the better. And I think that's all to the good within the alliance, and using those who have had the first-hand experience as the start.
Perhaps I have time for one more question. And there is a question about whether OPCON transfer will result in the reduction of US troops and forces. And perhaps Mr. Klingner, you can comment on this, and General Brooks, perhaps a short comment also would be great. Thank you.
Well, Presidents Bush and Obama pledged to maintain a floor of 28,500 American forces in the peninsula. So that hasn't changed, although there have been sort of recent threats to do so. There's nothing in the OPCON transition which has a characteristic of reducing US forces. As long as the North Korean threat remains at the current level, there'd be no need to, and it would, in my view, would be dangerous to reduce US forces before the threat for which they are deployed against has been reduced itself. So I don't see any reason to reduce, nor any indication that there's a decision to reduce US forces because of OPCON transition.
And I agree with the thinking on that. I don't see the need right now. However, I do believe that it's always important to assess the situation and determine what the operational need is. I have great confidence in the capabilities of the South Korean armed forces, and as they are significantly larger in number than the US forces on the peninsula on a given day. And that will be the case even after the demographic impacts of a smaller population emerge. It will still be the primary force. So what is needed relative to the primary threat, North Korea? Right now, the threat is actually rising. The conventional threat is rising. There might need to be a discussion about an increase of certain capabilities on the Korean Peninsula as a result. If we have a condition that is moving toward peace, maybe not. There may be confidence building measures that are associated with the force composition that realistically ought to be considered. So as we look at the emerging environment, that should determine what the force presence should look like in the composition of the force that is present nevertheless. Thanks.
Thank you,
Sorry,
General
Steve,
Brooks.
I just wanted to...
Oh, go ahead, Ashton.
General Lim also wanted to add in a comment, and I do apologize. It's also very relevant for the Korean perspective. So General Lim Ho-young, please, could you share with us your thoughts? Thank you.
사실 한국의 많은 국민들은
As a matter of fact, many Koreans in Korea, whenever they hear about that U.S. Force reduction, they are very sensitive about this issue. So it's not just that Korean Peninsula's military issue, but this is because there will be a huge influence on the socio-economic aspect. So leaving the U.S. force, leaving Korea, and this is directly related to survival of Korea, South Korea. So when you consider all these things, this decision has to be made very prudently, and also as a symbol of Korea-U.S. alliance. So how many military force is being maintained in Korea, that can be a barometer. So when we talk about the reducing US force, it's not just the military related questions. This is a very complicated, critical issue. So many Koreans are very sensitive about this particular issue. So I wanted to add that.